Hey everyone, it's Tammy. Thank you so much for being here. For all my subscribers, I really can't tell you how much I appreciate you being a part of this journey with me. For those of you who might be new to this, I hope you find what you're seeking. If not, by all means, let me know. The bottom line to who I am is honesty from my perspective. I have devoted over 30 years to pharmacology and aromacology. I am internationally certified as a master clinical aromatherapist, but I do call it aromacology because I work specifically with the understanding of how plants affect the human genome. The study of drug development is very big on my radar to this day. So that's kind of what you get here. And beyond that, I also really like to talk about and explore the things that are, I guess you want to say, almost against science. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. That's going to sound really strange. But I am challenging our current model, our current way of thinking. That's pretty much what I am doing. Let me just, before I go any further, apologize. I am getting over a pretty ugly cold flu that has been going around the community. I'm having to stage the light today because we're about to get a massive snowstorm apparently. So yeah, so just wanted to say that. But back to what I was talking about, between pharmacology and aromacology, the pharmacology, like I said, really is all about drug development, the study of plant constituents in relation to drug development. I'm not so interested in the chemical development of drug development, but they really do focus on plant constituents. And again, I'm here, my mission is to deliver truth, or I should say more specifically, honesty. To me, truth and honesty are very different. Truth is, there's only one truth, and that's love. Honesty is just factual information from my perspective, from my ongoing research on really what's at the base of health issues. And so I do study drug development. I do pay attention to how plant constituents affect the human genome. And so that's really what you get from me. In today's situation, I really want to emphasize, we're not going to get into any specific health condition. I really want to I'm going to address a few, but more specifically, pardon me, more specifically, it is really about paying attention to the symptoms. And the reason I bring this to our attention, and I will get into that more, is because, as I mentioned just a moment ago, getting to the root of health issues, which I know many people talk about, is high on my radar. And a few years back, I developed a program called Breaking the Cycle of Disease Management. And through the expansion of that program, I began to explore more in the areas of stress. And to kind of bottom line it there, the whole idea of stress is not really understood. And like I said earlier, I am here. I feel like I've been placed on this planet to challenge some of our thought processes. To give you an example, yesterday I had a client contact me who feels like she's dealing with parasites. Now, she just started with me not even a month ago, and for one particular reason, but of course the oils that I selected for her, I don't really want to give away a lot of information. So it was about soothing the stress response, and I'll get into what stress here is in a minute. But it was really, number one, about relieving the symptoms. I was improving, pardon me, there's a hair, and I just, no sense in stopping the recording for just that. Improving dopamine levels helping the body convert glutamate, because, and you can go back and watch other videos that I've done on heavy metals. When we're exposed to excessive amounts of heavy metals, which we really are, we're seeing a lot of dopamine and dopamine issues. Depending on how the epigenome is wired, depending on the individual, really translates how it becomes or interprets how it's going to manifest in the body. But basically, dopamine is a problem. Not a problem, but there is a problem with our dopamine levels. And at the same time, glutamate is involved. So dopamine and glutamate are involved in the process of storing heavy metals. When that happens, glutathione doesn't get produced as much. So that said, I'm enhancing her glutathione levels, like I said, relieving symptoms, supporting the digestive system, and so on and so on. And she came back with that she has some, what she feels like is parasites. I don't know that it's necessarily parasites, but I'm not going to argue with somebody about what they suppose is going on with their body. To me, it sounded like something else, potentially even yeast, which would make sense given what she's got going on. However, she's concerned about parasites, and in either case, the blends that she has is very beneficial for both cases. It's helping the body to eliminate excessive amounts of yeast, if there is any, and they also have the ability to help the body eliminate parasites. But her question was if she should go on a juicing cleanse. And the short answer to all of that was no. And the reason for that is because the liver actually requires amino acids and fats to be able to detox the body. And because there's a conjugation process there's 5 phases to it, which does include glutathione, and the production of glutathione requires amino acids. And as well as there's also an amino acid segment to the conjugation process. So there's a necessary component to having fats and protein in our ongoing diet. It's being intentional, and the oils are already helping to eliminate. So I told her I would much prefer, given what she's dealing with, that she do something that contained fats. I mean, I ultimately gave her pumpkin seed, ground up clove. I told her to make a smoothie of pumpkin seeds, ground up clove, papaya, a little bit of flaxseed oil. I think that was it. I think that was it. Yeah, that's what I told her to make a smoothie out of. She could throw some ginger root in there as well. But that would be a really good way of helping the body to eliminate them, and as well as protect her nervous system and keep her liver from feeling congested or getting congested. It actually helps it to remain, because when the liver becomes taxed and it's starting to detox too quickly, it'll congest. So this is the reason why. But I challenge our current mindset, because typically if you go out there, you're going to hear the exact opposite, and that is to do juice cleanses. So I do challenge the way we think. But I don't do it just mindlessly. I do it with substantial evidence to say otherwise than what we're currently being told. There are trends, and these trends make money for a lot of people. And while I don't discourage anybody from having a worthy living, I think honesty is the best policy, because ultimately our goal is to be healthy and well. And that's really why I'm here. And I think if we could all just begin to see it that way, and just it's simple. It's not as complex as we make it out to be. So that was a long introduction. But like I said, today I wanted to talk about, there's certain things that we often hear that are pretty scary health conditions that such as cervical cancer, ovarian cancer, aortic aneurysms. And it just came to mind because my son's friend, who is about 10 years older than him, actually passed away in his sleep the other night from an aortic aneurysm. And everybody was trying to console everybody. And of course, the statement came out that there's no symptoms. You would never know if you had one. Well, of course, you tell people that. People are we start to live in fear. I remember being younger and hearing people dying of just having horrific, just like in the middle of the night, and or just all of a sudden, and then they had these health conditions that apparently were symptom free, and so it makes you scared. It makes you afraid to live. And then, I'm not saying that we have to be like hypervigilant, but being aware. Okay, so those 3 health conditions that I mentioned alone, and I'm sure we could probably find more, because if I think about it, even prostate cancer really is symptom free. Of course, it could maybe say more, frequent urination, or maybe not being able to fully urinate. I mean, same thing can be said about cervical cancer. No, ovarian cancer. It was ovarian cancer. That the stomach becomes bloated, and either, you can't get enough to eat, or you feel full right away. I mean, so these are potential symptoms, but there's other reasons we would have that. Again, I'm not talking about being hypervigilant in this sense. I'm talking about more specifically paying attention to our bodies, and when something is different, and communicating that. Because the first thing I said to my son was, was there any sign? I mean, and he's like, well, no, they said there's no symptoms. Like, he had to have felt something. And unfortunately, the man had been, I guess, all of a sudden feeling physically a lot of pain. He was in a lot of, I mean, I don't know how you would, he was achy, I guess, maybe like flu-like. And instead of just getting it checked, because it was out of the norm, he just, dismissed it. And unfortunately, it cost him his life. That same thing can be said for, like I said, the cervical and the ovarian cancer. Pretty much most of our health conditions, if you think about it, we could all look at them and go, well, if only I had known, And so that I use these examples because if you go out and look, they'll give you, and that's one of the first things, is they're pretty much symptom free until it gets further advanced. Just so you know, I typed them up for the aortic aneurysm. It does. It says usually there's no symptoms unless there's a rupture, but you might have tenderness or pain in the chest. Have cough, shortness of breath, pain in the back, jaw, or the neck. If the rupture occurs, then you may experience sharp and sudden pain in the upper back, which radiates downward, pain in the jaw, neck, shoulder, or arms, and difficulty breathing. So it's pretty much the same thing. And now all it is, it's a thinning, basically, of the aorta. There's a bulge in the aorta. And of course, like I said, this freaked my son out. This is actually a fairly rare thing that goes on, but to me it's important to talk about here, as with the cancers, as with any health condition, whether we're talking about diabetes or high blood pressure. I mean, high blood pressure goes unrecognized because people feel fine and then they're not. It's hard, oftentimes when people become diagnosed with diabetes, there's really no sign that they're aware of. So I know I keep harping on that, but this to me is very important. And I've talked about this in prior videos. And I don't necessarily think I really focused on it, but the idea is that our idea of what's normal is so skewed. Because really, what's normal? It's interesting. As a coach, I often have talked to people about not comparing themselves to others. We shouldn't be it's not even a wise idea to compare ourselves to how we were yesterday. Just be with who we are and where we are today. But comparison is can be detrimental. because it keeps us out of the moment, is how I want to say that. When I say it's detrimental, because it keeps us out of the moment. When we're constantly thinking about something else or another time, we're not present. So being present with our health is really imperative. It's a valuable tool that you can potentially offset some pretty tragic experiences. And so a good example of snoring, I'll say snoring. People will just, well, that's, my dad did it, or, it's been a part of, I've done it for a long time. It's normal for me. Well, if it's normal for you, snoring is a sign of inflammation. Let's just say that. And so if if you're congested like this, maybe you're going to snore. If you have, pardon me, I had to get comfortable. If you have a history of sinus infections, you may have scar tissue in your sinuses. That's going to be a type of inflammation. Okay, so you're going to snore, but understanding why you're snoring is a good idea. If you're just snoring, but there's no sign of inflammation in your sinuses, I should say, you know what I'm talking about, colds and whatnot, but there is inflammation, it's time to get to the crux of what's causing that inflammation. Okay? Menstrual cycle, PMS, menopause. As a young girl, that's all I ever heard is like, it's uncomfortable, and you can go all over the internet. And it's like you can go everywhere and people are talking about, tender breasts, cramps, bloating, menopause. It's like hot flashes. I've actually witnessed women get completely red-faced and start fanning themselves with a freezer door. It's just, or, in the middle of the car in the middle of the winter, and they're sticking their head out the window because they're on fire from hot flashes and sweating profusely. And I can honestly say that that's not normal. I realize we've created a cultural norm. Okay? We've created the cultural norm. But the fact is, when the body is not experiencing inflammation, excuse me one moment. There we go. Sorry, Adobe was sending me a message and I needed to let them know that we needed to not talk about that right now. Anyway, as I was saying, there's inflammation, and I know that somebody might say that, well, the menstrual cycle, there's inflammation. I don't necessarily agree with that. It's a natural cycle, and it's a process, and I realize there's always discomfort. There's, it's not the most pleasant of experiences, but it's not something that should put us in bed and make us run out to have to go buy, over-the-counter pills, and, or it's just, if there's inflammation going on, I'm going to say that, obviously, even with the heavy clotting, because if you look at all of these conditions, if they're excessive, or I should say, if you look at these symptoms, they're excessive, then you're going to find there's a condition related to it. But my point is that a menstrual cycle is just that. It's a natural cycle of the body building up and the body releasing what it didn't use. And there's not a lot of inflammation around that. It's not an aggravating time. It's just a natural occurrence of hormones creating shifts. That's not inflammatory. And I speak like this because I never had problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that my body's 100% complete and perfect. What I'm saying is that let me back up. Okay, never say never, right? So when I was younger, that was an experience of mine. I had massive clots. I would have excessive bleeding. I would have a lot of, cramps. It was miserable. And it didn't make sense to me, so I took steps necessary to actually try to regulate that to where it was not an uncomfortable situation, other than just dealing with, 4 or 5 days of shedding tissue. Menopause, the same thing. Once I don't even really know when it happened, other than the main symptom, which is the end of a cycle. That was it. I never had the hot flash. I never had any of it. But I had done, the work a few years earlier to regulate that inflammation so that I didn't have to deal with it, because who wants to look forward to having to spend how many days or however long, waving this badge of like, hey, I just wasn't interested. My goal was just to flow through life, literally, and not have it be dramatic. I'm not into drama. I never have been. So to me, inflammation is drama. And what I find in our culture, society, there's a lot of inflammation, in the way humans interact with one another. There's a lot of inflammation. And to me, that's representative of all the inflammation in our bodies, because when the body is inflamed, it's going to behave differently. And again, I'm going to get into this. This is actually all relating to stress, and it actually relates to these symptoms. So these things that I'm talking about, let's go back to the aortic aneurysm. Okay, because when it comes to, let me back up a minute. When it comes to cervical and ovarian cancer, bear with me. Symptoms: vaginal bleeding after intercourse. This is for cervical cancer. Between periods or after menopause. Watery, bloody vaginal discharge that may be heavy and have a foul odor. Pelvic pain or pain during intercourse. Now, the thing is to understand that doesn't necessarily mean you have cervical cancer. What that means is, because the first thing it says under symptoms, early stage cervical cancer generally produces no signs or symptoms. I would say that you're going to have an irregular, or you're going to have, that wouldn't be the case. I'm just going to say that wouldn't be the case. These signs and symptoms potentially could be irregular cycles. It could be excessive bleeding. It would be around, like I was just talking about. Maybe a lot of clotting. Maybe, a heavy discharge. It could be anything. So the idea here is to really look at the inflammation that's occurring in the body long before anything like this sets up, because the fact is that cancer is not unlike an autoimmune disorder. The cells are adapting. The system has the epigenome, again, how the epigenome interprets the environment, whether it be internal or external environment, and it isn't constantly interpreting, because there's lots of chemicals that we're exposed to on a regular basis, whether it be in our foods, the air we breathe, and so forth. So it's constantly interpreting these environments. And it's going to adapt. It flips, switches. This is what the epigenome does. It's constantly modifying itself in order to keep us as much on top of our game as possible. But that will affect the way cells develop, because this change in the system means the body's now using nutrients differently. Not deliberately, not dysfunctionally, but because the body needs to be in protection mode. Now, someone might say cancer is not protection mode. Well, you're right, it's not protection mode, but it is a sign that the body has been in protection mode for a very long time. And like we talked about, inflammation and emotional inflammation does hold itself in the body. I don't know how many times I've heard people say that cancer is a sign of anger. Okay? I'm not agreeing with any one thing. What I am saying is, let's just take it all into consideration. If we're feeling inflamed, we're going to be inflamed with others, whether we want to or not. When this cold was going on full force and my eyes were like to pop out of my head, it was everything I could do to maintain a smile. I couldn't hear things, I couldn't feel things, and I compassionate way because I was feeling awful. And I just started saying that I can't hear you right now. I can't even think clearly. I just need to relax. I need to go lay down. I need to be okay by myself to take some of the pressure off. Now, I realize that things have to be handled in life, but I'm beginning to see that we can find a different way. I actually thought about this morning. I've talked about this again countless times. It is hard to relate how our context around life is affecting our health, but the way I see it, it is. So the context of good, bad, right, wrong. We see the body as being bad when it's, sick. It's dysfunctional. There's something wrong with it. And to me, I'm like, what's right about this? It's protecting me. It's, and how can I help it? How can I almost be grateful for it protecting me? Where can I turn this into gratitude? And how can I show up? That's what this is all about. And so, in the case of cancer, these cells have been, the body has been in chronic survival mode for a very long time. And ultimately, the cells have been changed because nutrition has been changed. It has been used differently. So, again, no signs, really. Maybe if we stopped telling our young girls that, period pain and inflammation and bloating and, and we stop normalizing the discomfort and start helping them to be more proactive about relieving the inflammation. Because here's the deal. Stress, like I mentioned a while back in the beginning, is not a bad thing. It's actually the sign that the body is in protection mode. Stress is a pressure point which causes the epigenome to change. And it changes intentionally to keep us safe. Long-term survival mode now makes us sick because we're not getting the nutrition that we need. And this is why paying attention to the early signs, even though everybody else tells us there aren't any, paying attention to that period discomfort now is indicative of helping. It's a sign. It's an early sign that there's inflammation. And the more we seek to relieve the inflammation, which is oxidative stress, and that doesn't mean going out and juicing. No, as I mentioned again, helping the body to detox is helping to keep the liver clean. And the body actually, and the liver requires good fats and proteins. It needs the amino acids, but the only way the body is going to break down these proteins into the usable amino acids. Again, when we're stressed, we're not using proteins and carbs and or fats effectively. I just put a post on synergessence.com about this, along these lines, about if we really have to help stabilize the digestive system so that we break down these macronutrients well enough to begin using these amino acids effectively to help keep it detoxed. So doing juicing and drinking a lot of antioxidants, while it may be beneficial health-wise because there's a purity, well, I would hope, but then if you're drinking bottled stuff, there's no telling what's in that. But even eating your vegetables and your fruits is a good idea because it helps to minimize the amount of oxidative stress. It helps the body to flush it, helps to keep the fluids moving, but it doesn't stop the production of oxidative stress. There's a big difference between just removing it, but if we don't get to the reason why we're producing oxidative stress, which is chronic survival mode, we're not really helping the body. We're just relieving symptoms. And so, this is not necessarily something that's for everybody because not everybody they're not interested in the root cause. I mean, if they are, please forgive me. But the idea of symptom relief, and like I said, juicing and getting your antioxidants is not sufficient enough to actually help the body eliminate these toxins and help stop the production of oxidative stress. And oxidative stress occurs in a various number of genetic complexes. Oxidative stress is occurring when in the presence of heavy metals. That's the reason why we're having dopamine issues in this, around the world. Oxidative stress is produced along the nitric oxide synthase complex, which is heavily involved in neurochemistry. It's heavily involved in cardiovascular, respiratory, digestive, and autoimmune. Again, that was written in that recent post on how to help the digestive system. And I'll put that link in the box below. So, the early signs of any health condition is going to be inflammation. We need to really stop normalizing discomfort, normalizing insomnia. Oh, it's normal. It's normal. We're getting older. It's normal. We're teaching our children that it's normal to feel like crap. We're teaching our children to disregard their bodies. And so that's why I say being present, being willing to not compare how we feel today to how we felt yesterday. Not compare my symptoms to your symptoms. But recognize that, a comfortable body is a comfortable body. We're here to be comfortable. That we're not here to experience discomfort. And if we're experiencing discomfort, that's a sign of inflammation. And we do live in an inflammatory world. There are too many chemicals that are causing inflammation. So the only way to get at it is to help stabilize the body. Is the best thing I can say. When it comes to an aortic aneurysm, well, they are studying this. Even though it is a rare incidence, they are looking into it. And the primary culprits that they're finding, and they're doing a lot more epigenetic work on it, because it's rare, they haven't done a lot of work looking into it. But before we even get into the epigenetics of that, and I'm not going to cover that here, but there are genes involved that they've identified. There's some similarities and and without going into a full list of genes. Can you hear the wind? There's signs of lipid, genes involved with lipid metabolism, genes involved with the renin and angiotensin, the use of renin and angiotensin, and inflammation markers. Those were the ones that were noted at first. And there's a whole page of those. That takes me right back to saying the way we use our nutrition. And I'm not talking about our vitamins and minerals. I'm not saying that we need to go out and mega dose on vitamins and minerals. It's not about that. It's about stabilizing the digestive system, stabilizing the autonomic nervous system so that we can stabilize the digestive system. Again, I talk about that in this piece. I wasn't even thinking about it. I was going to mention that, but now I can see why there's some relevance here. But to stabilize the autonomic nervous system and to stabilize the digestive system allows the body to actually break down the fats, lipid metabolism, proteins for use of amino acids, because currently we're not assimilating our amino acids very effectively, and carbs, because we're not assimilating glucose properly. We're not using glucose properly, and that's evidenced by the growing number of diabetic diagnoses and gluten issues. And in fact, the renin and angiotensin is also another reason for, we see we can't eat. So many people are talking about, I can't eat gluten and it causes, inflammation. Well, you can eliminate that, but that's not, you can stop eating gluten, okay? Just like you can take your antioxidants, but it's not getting to the root of the issue. The root of the issue is the body is in chronic survival mode. And the only way we're going to be able to get to that is, it would be nice to change the world overnight, but we're not going to see it happen. We need to strike up a relationship with ourselves. We need to be able to look at what's right about our situation. Instead of looking at what's wrong, look at what's right. What's right about this for me? I get to step in and help. You were given this one body to carry out whatever your life purpose is. What can you do? What's right about this? What's right about this situation is your body is communicating with you. This is what we have to teach our children. When they get an owie, we kiss it, we bandage it. we do whatever. If they have an upset tummy, so we give them permission to do all that. But as they begin, but we ourselves are complaining about, and then we just write it off as normal. That's just part of life. It's not a part of life. Life is not about discomfort. Yes, there's contrast, but it's not about staying in the discomfort. I realize that there's a lot of people saying, well, life exists outside your comfort zone. I'm not talking about that. Okay? When it's painful and you're unable to feel grounded and you're unable to navigate life effectively, that's not the discomfort they're talking about. Okay? Again, my coach hat is on right now. When we're talking about, living outside your comfort zone, it's like doing things that are not familiar. Experiencing life, allowing yourself to spread your wings and experience life, but then at that point you get to determine whether that works for you or it doesn't. Okay, if the discomfort works for you, if you're getting something out of it, then say so. But in the case of somebody who just lost their life, and two basically young children lost their father because the aches and pains of aging, that's not, no. Because young girls are seriously having, some major estrogen, or hormonal issues. Please, let's stop normalizing that. That's not normal, okay? No, I don't even like to use the word normal, but that's not healthy. Let's just call it that. That's not a healthy, functioning body. People don't have to be encouraged to live in that kind of discomfort. We can seek the comfort that our body is asking for. We can seek the comfort that we deserve. That's what I'm getting at here. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to talk about. Like I said, it's really about paying attention to the symptoms. It's recognizing that inflammation is starting at very, very early ages. We're seeing it with, sensory processing disorder. We're seeing it with autism. We're seeing it ADHD. Children are, we're seeing early onset of schizophrenia. We're seeing all kinds of stuff coming in with the children. There's inflammation. There's evidence of it everywhere. Eczema. My youngest son basically was born with eczema. So it's coming in everywhere. So if we start paying attention to the fact that there's, we're living in an inflammatory environment and it's manifesting, the body's interpreting the inflammation correctly. Okay, let's just look at it that way. The body's interpreting that message correctly. That's what's right about this. And we have the opportunity to do something about it. I realize that our current model is about control, which is the reason why the juicing, which is for the reason why we go gluten-free, we go casein-free. I get that that's how we want to control the body. We go sugar-free. There's so many diets out there. My background does include nutrition, by the way. So we have all these abilities to control the body and relieve the symptoms, but that's not actually getting to the root of the issue. Stabilizing, helping to stabilize that body so the inflammation can come down and the wellness is sustainable. That's really what my mission is. So let me know what questions you have. Feel free to comment below. I don't want to get into any really specific questions in the comments. If you really want to talk with me personally, you're welcome to go to my website, synergessence.com. The link is in the box below. On the services page, there is a way to contact me there. I charge $35 for an assessment to talk with me. So check it out. Let's visit that possibly. Yeah. Otherwise, Instagram, Twitter at Tammy Davis 8. You can also join me on Facebook on my Synergessence page. And yeah, let's start a conversation, because really what I'm about here is that we stop normalizing discomfort. Stop comparing ourselves to one another, and really understanding that inflammation is at the root. And I'm sure you already know that part, but we have to get to the point of stabilizing that. And the body is absolutely interpreting the inflammatory messages coming in correctly. Now, We want to help it, because I'm going to close with this. Everything is a reflection, okay? I'm a reflection of you, you're a reflection. I mean, we reflect qualities about ourselves. You know, we see other people and we like what we see in other people. There's things that we don't like about certain people, and if we were being honest in the privacy of our own little space, we would recognize that we had some of those same qualities, and those are the things that we didn't like about ourselves. I mean, so we're here to mirror one another. Be truthful. There was an experience that I had with a couple just this morning, and I just kind of just stepped back, and I started seeing, because there was 4 of us and a dog involved, and it wasn't like really bad. It was just an experience. And what I began to see is I could see each one of us in each one, including the dog. It was interesting. And so when I say that, the internal world of our body is reflecting the external world. I mean, as above, so below. Okay? That's a principle in alchemy, in Hermetic, as above, so below. And so my point is, if we started as below, so above. And so the idea here is that if our body's interpreting these messages correctly, and this is what happens when we see people argue, okay? We see them argue and one person says something and the next person reacts. It's very rare that somebody says, wait a minute, just leave me alone. And if they do say, leave me alone, oftentimes the other person keeps pushing them. And so that boundary isn't respected. And then the other person continues to engage. So I'm not saying that one person's being disrespectful. I'm saying they're both disrespecting the boundary. So, I mean, we can get into a very long, detailed conversation about this. But the fact is when we're seeing 2 people argue, or we're seeing 2 belief systems argue, they're mirroring one another. Even though they're talking about different points, even though they're each wanting something different, there's still, the behaviors are mirroring one another. Try this sometime. I sat at a table once with somebody, and she was so intent on making me do something. And I was feeling, and I actually felt myself being lured in, and I realized I was getting caught up in her story, and I just pulled back. Just pulled back. And what was not long after I pulled back, she backed up. So without even realizing it, we are mirroring one another. And that said, so the body is, and so the body is mirroring the external world. But just because this is our experience doesn't make it the norm. It makes it the norm for now. But we have an opportunity to change this. We can go, wait a minute, no, I don't want to do this. I want to go this way until you calm down. And then when you can hear me, I'll come back. And then we have to honor our boundary. Regardless of how much this keeps going, we have to continue to walk away. Not out of disrespect, but out of respect. But then be our word and come back and actually address the issue at another point. Now, how the other person reacts is up to them. But the thing is that we don't have 100% control over it. We have control over ourselves, and we have the ability to influence. So it's not about control, it's about influence. We have the ability to influence. And so when you influence somebody to actually, I almost want to say, upgrade your interactions, you've now made a difference in the world. And so if we can influence our body to upgrade its responses, one by one, we might actually create the ripple that would ultimately change the external environment. Just a thought. Anyway, I appreciate you watching, especially if you got to this point. Hope it was helpful information, and hope to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and until we meet again, be well.